Hello, everyone. Welcome. Just a friendly reminder to make sure you are comfortable, to not be listening to this live because you feel like you have to, but because you want to. Really just checking in and asking yourself, like, if this is listening to a talk on money and shame is going to feel restorative right now, or it's going to feel not good, restrictive, constrictive. And sometimes, yes, I think that this is a really great question to ask ourselves before we dive into any topic that can be uncomfortable is this discomfort going to help me feel better? Or is this discomfort going to help me or cause me to feel like worse overall in the long term? I'm very big on helping people create distress tolerance, which is the ability to handle uncomfortable situations, the ability to ride out uncomfortable sensations and feelings, situations in order to get to that other side where things feel better, where things feel more regulated, where things feel more aligned. And sometimes the cool part about distress tolerance is that you understand that if things go outside of that window of tolerance, that you have full permission to not listen to the thing, to not watch the thing, to not do the thing, to go do some more self-soothing behaviors or regulatory behaviors in order to get yourself back into that window. And then you can pick the thing back up. So if you're watching this live and you decide that you need to do pause and come back to the replay, great. Just drop a comment in where you write like coming back. And then that way you have the time post to when you stopped watching the thing. And I can also check in on you to make sure that you're doing okay afterwards. So we have a lot of new people in this space. I appreciate everyone saying good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you're at, whenever you're watching this or listening to this. And so we have a lot of new people in the group, which I'm so very excited about. For those of you whom I haven't had the privilege of talking with yet or connecting with, I'm so thankful you're here. We at the Institute are so happy that you are here. I typically give content warnings at the beginning of all of these talks, right? We're in a trauma group. Like I said, some of the things we talked about can be distressing. So just like really paying attention to what your nervous system can handle today. And like making yourself right for whatever it is that it is able to handle or it isn't able to handle right now. So we are talking, today is the very first of 4 series on shame. And I'm very excited about this topic in particular because shame is one of these topics that we don't talk about. We don't talk about shame. And it's actually, I get a little twisted sense of pleasure when I get to go in somewhere and bring the anti-shame concepts and content to a space where we typically don't talk about it, because shame grows in the darkness, right? Shame lives in all of those spaces where we don't allow ourselves to shine light on it and say, hey, it's okay that you're here. And so these talks are really designed, my intention with these is to create a safe space or a safer space, because no space is inherently safe, right? To create a safer space for us to really look at the top ways that we as humans experience shame, the top areas in which we experience shame. And so I want to start with money because it's a big one. And especially because we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the group and a lot of salespeople in the group, I think that it's a really powerful one to start with, because this is what your whole livelihood is based on, right? Is sales, is on money. And I know for me personally, all the work that I've done around shame and around money, like being an entrepreneur and running a business, running two businesses, running an organization and my own personal business is, there is a lot of shame that comes up around that. So, and even if you're not an entrepreneur, we all experience money shame, because money is one of these things like food, right? Like love, like our bodies, that we can't get away from, right? Unless we decide to, renounce all of our worldly possessions and go live at the top of a mountain somewhere where there's, enough food and water for us to eat or to drink, then we need money. And even then, right? Like if you're like, oh, I'm just going to live off of the gifts that other people give to me. Well, how do you think they got those? Money, right? So like money is one of these things that we just simply can't get away from in our current society. It's required for us to survive. And so I think it's one of these things that is so important to talk about from a shame perspective, because the things that we feel shame around that we can't get away from, right? That we have reminders of on a consistent basis, like these are the ones that cause a lot of damage. These are the ones that you can't pretend, or you can do your best to pretend that these aren't problems, that you aren't experiencing shame around these things, but like it's going to keep popping back up over and over and over. And so if we can recognize where the shame is, if we can create some self-acceptance, right? Self-love is great. And if we can just even start with some self-acceptance of this is where I'm at in how I feel about myself, how I feel about money, how I feel about my relationship with money or my past with money, if we can create self-acceptance around that, that is the window into releasing the shame. So when we talk about the word shame, right? Shame is one of these things that's really hard to define. And even when I read definitions in the dictionary, I'm like, that doesn't quite hit it. And so I think that for me, the best way to think about shame, and you might have heard me say this before, is, when we think about guilt versus shame, right? We know what it feels like to feel guilty and we know what it feels like to feel shame, and they're two different experiences. When I feel guilty, it's because I did something wrong, right? I did something quote unquote wrong that, according to my morals and values, was out of alignment, was not in integrity with how I wanted to show up, right? That's guilt. And guilt can be helpful and can be harmful depending on, what's going on in that situation. But shame isn't I did something wrong, it's I am wrong. There's a part of me that is wrong for having wanted what I just wanted, for having done what I just did, for having acted the way that I just showed up, right? And so guilt and shame can go hand in hand. And so often what we think we are feeling guilty about, we're actually feeling ashamed of. So using shame as a self-regulatory practice is actually not helpful. Shame is designed to help us feel like we are, it's designed to help us cut off pieces and parts of ourselves, or hide pieces or parts of ourselves, or change pieces or parts of ourselves in order to be in alignment with society, in order to be in alignment with our community, in order to belong, right? As mammals, belonging, being part of a community is an incredibly deep need. To love and be loved is an incredibly deep need for us as humans. And so, and as mammals in general, that's how we survive. Because if people don't love us, they don't take care of us. And especially as children, as babies, if we do things where people decide that they don't love us or they don't want to care for us, our needs actually won't get met. We won't survive. So experiencing shame, when we experience shame, it's actually an experience of, oh, this is a threat to my survival. This is a threat to my my life. This is a threat to my continued existence. And so this is why shame is so powerful when people use it, or when we use it against ourselves, because if we feel like we're dying, if we feel in our bodies like, oh my goodness, by me having been this way, by me being this human, I'm actually losing connection with others and I'm losing like a life force, then it makes it really, really easy for us to be like, okay, I'm never doing that again, right? Even if I want to do that again, I'm never doing that again, because that felt so dangerous. That felt so wrong. So when we talk about money, right, there are a few places that shame really shows up. And so first of all, even just thinking about, I'm going to pose this question to you to think about on your own as I'm talking, is, looking at what you learned about money, looking at what you learned about resources, right? Who's allowed to have what, and how much are they allowed to have? And when they get to a certain point, how much becomes too much, and what's too little, and where are we allowed to put, where is it okay for us to put our resources, and where should we hold back on our resources? Where should we give other people resources even when we need them, or where should we hold on to them even when other people need them, right? When we think about money and we think about financial resources, or just resources in general, because resources are bought with money, or are paid for, or are given to us as a result of a financial transaction, usually, right? When we think about that, think about what you learned. So for me, there's a couple things that I learned about money, right? One is that I learned that you work really hard for money, right? You work hard for your money, and your money should be well earned, right? There should be a good amount of sweat equity that went into getting your money, right? And yeah, so if I want to say this again, if you feel your trauma being triggered through this, pay attention to what's going on inside of you. Come back to the 10-second protocol if you know what that is. If not, we have that in the resources. This is a really great way to self-regulate when you feel yourself get activated or triggered. But like, just please take care of yourself through this whole thing, because this whole thing is one giant content warning, trigger warning. So, yeah, money, sweat equity is required to make money, right? And I'm trading my time for money. Time gets traded for money, right? Money equals time, which is really fascinating, because that's not true, right? Time is worth way more than money, because you like it's just from a resource perspective, they're not the same. But a lot of us were taught time equals money, right? So if I'm enjoying myself over here and quote unquote not working, I'm wasting time, which means I'm wasting money, right? Versus thinking about like, oh, actually, when I rest and rejuvenate and enjoy myself, and like, don't worry about making money, or don't spend all this time over in my business, or don't, pick up the extra overtime shift at work, I have less money in the moment, but that actually helps me be more rested and rejuvenated, so then I can go and make more money in the time that I'm being intentional about working, right? Different mind frame. Okay, so yeah, so people are sharing, I learned your money is your family's money, right? Your money is my money, and my money is your money, and our money is our money. And so even if I want to keep something for myself, if you need it, I must give it to you, right? By the way, anyone who's done boundary work with me in here, anyone who's watched the lives on boundaries, there's some fun boundary issues, some fun boundary dynamics going on in there, right? Mine is yours and yours is mine, and we're both responsible for each other's. There's some interesting boundary or lack of boundary things happening there. Yeah. We only need enough to live comfortably. Wanting any more than that is selfish. Yeah. So having a couple people say having more than enough money is shameful. So you shouldn't want more than enough. You shouldn't want more than enough. And this is actually a belief that I held too, which was so fascinating, because what happened for me, yes, and you should always be making more of it. What happened for me personally is as I, progressed through my schooling, through my training, as I got jobs that were more complex, that required more skills, that required more experience, that required more knowledge and practice, my salary went up. And yet at the end of the month, there was always like not enough money or like just enough money, right? Like my balance was everything was always balancing out to zero. Like getting back to zero was always where I was trying to get to, which was so fascinating because I was making more and more and more, and yet always ending up at zero. And that was so confusing to me of like, why can't I save money? Why can't I have more than enough? Like, what is going on? And then I realized, oh, it doesn't actually feel safe for me to have more than enough. So as I'm getting more and more, I'm spending it, or I'm paying off any debt, because we're going to talk about debt. Debt is bad, right? And I have to get back to zero. I have to get back to zero. So if I have any extra money in my bank account, it's going to go straight to debt, even if I might need that next month, because I need to be at zero now, because otherwise I experience shame. Right? Yeah. So being unable to work and having somebody provide you with money, right? Having a disability, having an injury, being on leave, paid leave, right? Having the experience of, I don't deserve to have this because I haven't worked for it, right? Another really big source of shame. And then we have debt, right? If we're always supposed to be getting back to zero, if things are supposed to be fair, I'm supposed to spend as much as I make, then debt, whenever I have to take on any debt, I'm going to feel really, really bad about that, right? And that debt that I take on has to be a good decision. This is another place, right? Every financial decision that I make has to have a financial return on investment. Every financial decision that I make has to have a financial return on investment, or I'm going to experience shame. So for my entrepreneurs out there, entrepreneurship is inherently risky. The return on investment is never guaranteed. It's not really guaranteed with a job where you are working for somebody or not either, right? Like it's not guaranteed if you have a career necessarily as well, if the pandemic has shown us anything, right? Because newsflash, we all participate in entrepreneurship because we all either own businesses or work in businesses. So I always think it's really fascinating when people look at entrepreneurs and they feel like, and they see, oh my gosh, that's so risky from a money standpoint. I could never participate in that, right? What I hear when somebody says that is that the level of shame that I would feel if this failed, right? I can't handle that risk tolerance. My nervous system cannot handle that. And that's okay. We are not all meant to have the same levels of risk tolerance when it comes to money. We're all very different humans. So there's no shame around that. If you're hearing me say that and being like, oh yeah, no, that's how I feel. No, please do not use these loving words to shame yourself. I say all of this to just kind of point out some of the ways that we think, right? So some people never go into entrepreneurship because they're like, nope, I would feel so much shame around that if this failed that I just can't do it, right? And a lot of that would be financial because there wouldn't be a return on investment. I would have wasted my money, right? Some people don't do this because they don't trust themselves with money, because When they were younger, they were taught that they were bad with money, or they were irresponsible with money, or you were were reckless with money, or the way that you saw money was wrong compared to your family or compared to society, right? And so you're like, I can't even get into this, right? Yes. And then this gets really fun. This whole conversation gets really fun around what our money stories are and what we feel shame around in regards to money when we partner up with other humans. So when I have a business partner, when I hire an employee, when I enter into a relationship with somebody where we're going to share finances, and there's also a romantic component to this, and a romantically intimate component to this, right? What do they believe about money? So this was actually something really interesting that my husband and I went through, because we had very, very different, I don't want to say very, very different, but like pretty different experiences growing up around money, right? The word that my family always used was comfortable. We're comfortable. Anybody else's family use that word? We're comfortable. I never knew what comfortable meant. I didn't know how much money that meant. I just knew that it meant that you always had enough to pay your bills, and you had enough to have some fun, and you had enough to go on a family vacation every year. But like above and beyond that, I didn't know what that meant. What I did know is that the place in which I lived, the community in which we lived, a lot of people in that community were not just comfortable. They were way above comfortable. And I remember really being in this experience of being around people who had like significant wealth, right? When we pulled into the parking lot at school, every juniors and seniors got parking spots at our school. And to see the types of cars that were parked in that parking lot, right? It was a very interesting experience of, oh, wow, like I shouldn't want more than enough, but also like, it would be really nice to have all of this, right? And yeah, for many people in that experience too, because we lived in an area that had literally had a railroad track running through it. And there was a distinction between which side of the tracks you lived on, or if you lived close to the tracks versus you lived on the other side up on the hill, right? This is so fascinating to me now, even just talking about this, because did you live up on the hill or did you live close to the railroad tracks, right? There were many people at my school that were way less comfortable than we were. They weren't comfortable, right? And while the dynamic was like, oh yeah, we can all be friends and we can all get along, like there was definite shame, definite poking, definite like scarcity mentality, I don't have enough mentality that happened a lot. And so I think that it's important to just even think about, okay, what did I learn from my family, but also what did I learn as a child, as an adolescent, as a teenager, as a young adult, from the people that I was in community with as well? Did I have more or did I have less? What did that mean about my identity as I was growing up, right? So I'm loving these comments. I love how much y'all are engaging. I'm also having a little trouble keeping up. So I'm going to come back to them. I'm just going to keep talking and I'll come back to them in a little bit. So thinking about your own money stories of, okay, what does it mean for me and for my family in terms of money? What does it mean for me and the people that I'm in community with as I grow up in terms of money? What did I learn about money? And then, like I was saying, from an intimate relationship standpoint, so this is my situation. My husband had a very different situation. And so when I spent money versus how he spent money, or how we both look at money, how we both manage money, who manages it and who just goes along for the ride, right? Who doesn't even want to look at things versus who's like in every penny and every cent? Who is the one that is more restrictive and squirrels things away, and who is the one who maybe is more willing, is more risk tolerant to spend the money. Coming back to entrepreneurship, does one of you have a higher risk tolerance than the other does for failure, right? One of the good things that I learned about money, one of the serving, I don't want to say good, one of the serving things I learned about money was that it was always possible for me to make more money. I can always find a way to get more money, always. I can always find another source of financial income, always. So for me, there's a much higher risk tolerance, because if I spend money and it doesn't go well, right? Or if I spend money and the return on investment isn't what I'm expecting, then I know, okay, I can just go back out and make more. Well, being in partnership with somebody who doesn't have that same belief, this is going to feel way scarier for them, right? If they don't also believe money's easy to come by, right? If their story isn't, oh yeah, like, you know, we get to stay comfortable, we always get to have enough, we just aren't allowed to have more than enough. If their story is, it's hard to even have enough, then my behavior versus their behavior, my behavior is going to feel very, very unsafe to them. And their behavior is going to feel very, very, very frustrating to me, right? If we believe different things about debt, right? And by the way, just to kind of show you that our thinking around debt is so fascinating in terms of shaming people for different kinds of debt, I'm going to just say several different kinds of debt, and I want you to think about which of these kinds are good, which of these kinds are bad, and which of these kinds are like meh, either way, right? Mortgage, investment property, yacht, boat, car loan, student financial aid debt. Sorry, not financial aid, student loan debt, business loan debt, credit card debt, owing someone else money, like a friend or a family member, a personal loan from a family member or friend. How different do all of those types of debt feel to you? Because for some of you, a mortgage may feel great. You're like, yeah, a mortgage is, that's just what we do, right? You want to own a home, you want to live in a home and not have to pay for rent, then yeah, you take on a mortgage. This is what, yeah, that's just what happens. For some of us, like me, credit card debt used to feel very, very, very shameful. And now I'm like, it's just, it's money that the bank gave me to do what I needed to do, right? Yeah, child support debt. Thank you, Catherine. Like credit card debt used to feel inherently dangerous to me. And now I'm just like, okay, like that just is what it is. That's money that somebody loaned me to be able to do what I needed to do. And whenever I'm able to pay it back to them, I will, right? One of the most fascinating, mind-blowing experiences I had is with one of my coaches, Julia Bernard Thompson. She's incredible. She, when I was talking about you know, my feelings on this, like a while ago, maybe a couple of years ago. And I was like, yeah, I just feel really bad because I still have some business debt and yada, yada. And it's on a personal credit card. And like, I really just want the business to make enough money to pay this off. And then, or I was like, oh, or like, I want a business credit card because then that feels different, right? Because it's business debt versus personal debt, another distinction, right? And she's like, okay, so business debt does not feel shameful to you, but personal debt does, is essentially what she said. I don't think she used the word shame, but I was like, I don't know. She's like, do me a favor. Go in your wallet, like right now, like go get your wallet. And I want you to pull out a credit card and I want you to pull out your bank card, like your debit card. I was like, okay. She had me hold them up and she was like, Lee, I can't tell the difference between those cards. She's like, they're both magnetic pieces of plastic with 16 numbers printed on them, an expiration date, and a security code. And when you use either of those at the grocery store or to buy your kids clothes or to pay for somebody to come contract in your business, whoever you are paying does not know the difference. They're not like, oh, that's credit card money. No, thank you. Right? They're like, oh, you're giving us money? Great. She was like, so if every place that you're using these cards does not care where that money is coming from, why do you? And then we got into, I was like, oh, it's because, when I use this one, it's free, right? It's money I've already earned. It's money that already is in my bank account. When I use the credit card, there's interest. She was like, okay. She's like, so let's think about this. She's like, let's say you have 10 grand on a credit card. And let's even jack up the interest rate, 20% interest rate, annual percentage, APR. Okay. So let's say that you end up paying 2 grand in finance charges, in interest this year for making a 10K investment. My question to you is if you make that 10K investment, do you believe that it's going to make you $12,000 or more? Do you believe that the knowledge, experience, and wisdom, or the actual resources that you get from this thing, are going to make you more than 12K? And not just this year, but overall, right? Because if the answer to that is yes, then that's a great investment. In terms of looking at this from a financial perspective alone, right? And to take this even further, so much return on investment from how we spend money is about the experience and not the end goal. It's about the journey, not the destination, right? So if I invest $10,000 and it turns out that I hired a coach that or I bought a product, or I did something, and that really did not work out. What did I learn? Does that $10,000 mistake save me $100,000 later in life? Because when I then go bigger and do this again, I know that that's not the way to go. I know that I need to choose a different avenue. So did quote unquote wasting that $10,000 actually save me $100,000? Here's the other thing as well. Am I, and this is a place to catch to see if you have shame here, am I allowed to spend money and not have a financial return on investment? Am I allowed to spend money just because I enjoy the thing that I'm getting from it? Am I allowed to take my family on the vacation, even though I could use that money to pay down a credit card, because the experience of going to Disney World, or going traveling in an RV across the country, or taking them to Europe to see where their ancestors lived, or whatever, that experience is valuable to my soul, to my family? Am I allowed to do that? And if the answer to that is no, my just perspective on this is, where did you learn that your personal pleasure and enjoyment was to be sacrificed at the cost of having less debt? Where did you learn that your personal pleasure and enjoyment were to be sacrificed at the cost of the thought that you have an extra 2K on a credit card? Now, some of y'all are like, that would actually, even from a very aligned place, that wouldn't feel good. It wouldn't feel good to spend all of that money on a vacation, right? If that's how you feel, fine. If you're like, actually, I wouldn't really enjoy that experience. But if you're not enjoying that experience out of shame around how you feel about money, that's a different story than, nope, it actually just wouldn't be a fun thing for me to do. So let's talk about this next part too. Well, what if you're irresponsible? What if you make that decision and then later on you can't pay for things? Y'all, hear me, please. Do you know how many people that I know who spend their entire lives being incredibly responsible with money? Responsible, meaning they do everything right. They save, they invest, they do all the things, quote unquote, right, according to whatever their morals and values are. And something happens and they lose it all. And when you talk to a lot of them about it, like I've read a lot of these stories, they're like, man, I really wish, had I known now what I knew, or like, had I known then what I know now, gosh, I wish I'd had a little bit more fun with this. Or I wish that I would have trusted myself more. I wish that I would have trusted myself more, because this is the thing about shame. Shame tells you that you're wrong for being who you are. Shame tells you that you're wrong for thinking how you want to think. Shame tells you that you're wrong for acting how deep in your soul you know you want to act. And so many of us have had so many layers of shame laid upon us around money for so long that we don't even know, we don't even remember how it feels good for us to interact with money. Say that again. So many of us have been programmed for so long by so many sources to believe what we believe about money and to feel shame around money in order to act the way that others think we should, that we can't remember how it felt good for us to interact with money in the first place. Or maybe we never even learned it. Maybe we never even had the opportunity to learn it. So it's a coming back to learning how to trust yourself, self-acceptance of like, okay, you know what? My current money habits are like this because of the shame that I'm experiencing. My current money habits are like this because of what I learned and because of the shame that I'm experiencing around that learning. And so what would happen? What could it look like if I started doing the work of really remembering or relearning how it feels good for me to be in relationship with money? I say this to you all not from a place of like, I'm not trying to preach down the mountain to you, right? And what I will also say is that I've done this work. I'm not even close to being done, right? I still have to do this work at every new level I get to, every new experience and new shift. I get to do this work over and over again. And I actually shared this quote from a book. I have it sitting right here. That's so perfect. From a book that I was reading yesterday that and this morning that was really, really powerful. And it is, if we could realize that the work is to keep doing the work, we would be much more fierce and much more peaceful. So I think a lot of us, when it comes to money and some of the other types of shame that we're talking about, we think that this is something that like we work through and then we're done. So maybe you've healed, quote unquote, a lot of your money trauma. You've released a lot of shame around money. And then a new experience pops up that re-triggers that. That's normal. That's to be expected. And you shouldn't feel shame around the fact that now that you are in this new experience or at this new level or in this new opportunity, that your old previous programming is coming back in, that the shame has reappeared. That is to be expected. And so taking the perspective of, okay, self-trust, creating self-trust around money, I know that the work is going to be to continue doing the work. The work is to continue doing the work. Meaning, I am going to consistently and compassionately look at what I am believing around money and reframe it and continue to trust myself that A, I can keep doing this work, and B, that as a result of doing this work, things will get better. Things will feel better. So a couple people have mentioned some good books in here that I love. I haven't actually read Amanda Francis's book, but I've done some of her courses. Denise, what is it? Denise Duffield Thomas, Catherine Ponder. I'm trying to think of Napoleon Hill. Really good authors on this. Because, you know, when we talk about, a lot of these people talk about manifestation or creating the life that you desire, and especially around money. When you are looking at manifesting or creating a life you desire, if you are using shame, or you are using restriction as a way, as a path to creation, you're not going to get there. You're just going to keep creating more of the same of what you don't want. And so creating self-compassion, self-awareness, self-acceptance around, okay, this is how I'm currently acting. And then asking yourself, okay, and if I was going to act differently, what would that look like? And then putting yourself in places where you have resources to then do that work, surrounded by other humans who are doing it in a way that you want to be doing it, who are thinking in a way that you want to be thinking, who are acting in a way that you want to be acting. That's key. So, y'all, I love Denise Duffield Thomas. And I'm going to say that her forgiveness release exercise that she talks about in Get Rich, Lucky Bitch is actually like, should be credited back to Catherine Ponder and to Napoleon Hill a good 50, 60, 70 years before her, because they are the OGs around this in this personal development journey. And they talk about the creation of a vacuum. And so I want to talk about this with y'all because I think that this is one of the best ways, and it's so aligned with the release of shame, is one of the best ways to create space for yourself to then figure out what you want to do next and how you want to show up next and how you want to trust yourself and how you want to move. So this exercise is a forgiveness and release exercise. It's an exercise in which we look at, where are all of the places I'm hanging on to shame? Where are all the places I'm hanging on to resentment? Where am I hanging on to judgment? Where am I hanging on to hate or anger or frustration or sadness or embarrassment around money, both towards myself and towards others? There is no space to call in what you desire if it is filled up with shame and resentment and feelings that don't feel good. There is no space. You will continue to do the same things over and over. I don't care how consciously you try to change, subconsciously, underneath, the thinking underneath and the feeling underneath, if we don't get to that, I don't care how many times you write out an affirmation of, I'm good, I'm going to be the richest person in the world. It doesn't matter. If you're still hanging on to shame, fear, resentment, blame, guilt, anger, sadness, embarrassment, you still have those emotions bottled up, there's no space to call in that wealth. And there's no space to even like really reframe what it is that you want. You don't even know what it is that you want because what you think you want is not what you want, because what you think you want is being driven by shame. Right? I hear so many people say, if I could just get out of debt, if I could just get out of debt, if I could just pay this off, if I could just stop spending so much, if I could just do this, if I could just, if you hear yourself saying, if I could just, that's a shame-based statement. Because I promise you, if you could just do that, you're either going to then get yourself back into the same situation you were in, or you're going to find some new way to create discomfort for yourself. Because if you're feeling shame about how you show up, or you're feeling resentment and anger and blame towards another person for how they showed up or how they taught you how to show up, that's always going to come back and muddy the waters. So, invitation. Get a piece of paper. 2 invitations, actually. This is one exercise that I have my clients do. I have them write a letter to money. And I have them write a letter to money as if they are in an intimate, romantic relationship with money. Now, if that doesn't feel good for you, just intimate relationship, close relationship, friend base. But an intimate relationship with money. And I have them talk to money as if money is a person and describe how they feel in that relationship. So, dear money, I feel like you're a booty call. I feel like you only ever come around in very specific situations, show up, do your thing, and leave. I feel very disconnected from you. Or I feel like you're that partner that I have that every time I'm like, yes, I really want to be in relationship with you, you run away. And then when I'm like, never mind, I don't want to be in relationship with you, you come back. Describe how money feels to you in that relationship, and then describe how you feel you act towards money in that relationship. And look at, because you will see very quickly where the fear, where the resentment, where the anger, where the shame, where the terror, where the wishy-washy behavior, where the manipulation, where the victimhood, where all of those things are. And if you're really into this, do this for like a week or a month consistently. Write to money. Right? So that's the first exercise, because you're going to get really clear on what you're actually thinking and how you're actually showing up. The second exercise is this release and forgiveness exercise. So the way that I like to do this is I get a piece of paper and one colored pen, and I write the things that I know I need to release or practice forgiveness around, both towards myself and towards others. So I just write them as statements. So they might be specific experiences, like the time I went to the grocery store and thought I had enough money and didn't, and had to put everything back. The time my mom had to help me pay off a credit card. The time the time, I'm just kind of making things up because these aren't actually examples for me. Well, the first two were, but like I'm trying to think of some other ones. The time I didn't tell my spouse that I was spending money on something because I thought they'd get upset. The time my spouse told me I couldn't spend money on something I really wanted. The time my mom, when I was 8, my mom came into my room and took all my money out of my piggy bank because she needed it to pay a bill or to pay for something else. How I heard my parents talk about my siblings and how good they were with money compared to how good I was with money. Just some examples. Now, here's what I want you to hear is you're leaving space between these. And then you're going to come back with a different colored pen and you're going to write one of two things. And you can choose whichever feels better and you can alternate between the two, or one day you can do one and one day you can do the next. So one exercise is where you write the Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian phrase that means 4 things. Thank you. I love you. I forgive you. I'm sorry. Thank you. I love you. I forgive you. I'm sorry. And you write that under each one, whether it's a statement about yourself, whether it's a statement about somebody else, whether it's a statement about a situation versus a general feeling. That's what you write. And then you write that under each one, and then you're done for that day. And then you come back and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And you do this on a relatively consistent basis. Or anytime you're noticing that, oh, wow, this new money struggle has popped up, or I'm trying to get to this new level, or I'm trying to do this new thing, this is what you do. So for me, I'm actually having a realization that I haven't done this in a while. And I'm like, oh, this needs to be like, I need to commit to 7 days of this. So if anyone else wants to commit to doing 7 days of this with me, please let me know. We'll do it together this week. And so that's one option. The other option is that you write the truth. You write the truth of that statement underneath, right? So you say, let's say the one where you said, that time I felt bad because I did X. The truth is, I was doing my best. The truth is, I was going through a really hard time in my life, and in that moment, I did my best. Or the truth is, I can see where my parents were simply trying to create safety for me. They weren't trying to shame me because money felt unsafe for them. Or the truth is, I'm allowed to have more than enough and not feel bad about it. And you can go through and do the truth is statements. I really like the Ho'oponopono statements. And sometimes if there's one that feels particularly shamey, I need to reframe it. I need to remind myself, what else could this mean? What else is the truth? The truth is I'm feeling shame here. And the other truth is I don't need to. And here's why. Okay, cool. I've got some people committed to this with me. Very excited. When you can start really deciding how it feels good to be in relationship with money, and when you can release and forgive all of these things that are taking up a ton of space in your nervous system, in your brain, you create a vacuum to call in more of what you desire. And then you also intentionally move in ways that call in what you desire. You create space for the things that you want to actually come to you. And you also start taking steps, aligned steps, action towards the things that you want. So doing both of these things together This is massive. This is how, and I'm going to give you guys a few pieces of evidence here in my own life in this last few minutes, not because actually it's hard for me to do this. The shame piece says, be humbly. Don't tell people these things. Right? The truth is I still have a lot of student loan debt, that I have business debt, right? That I have these things, that I have a mortgage, that I have a car loan. Those are the truth. And the other truth is that when I stopped shaming myself about those things and started really looking at those as, wow, what gifts that somebody was like, yes, Lee, you can have this money to have this thing until you have the money to give it back to us. When I started looking at life like that, that's when I started making a lot of money. And that's when I started allowing money to stay in my bank account. We have more money in our bank account right now than we ever have. And we also still have debt. And I don't have a burning, shameful push to take all that money in my bank account and put it towards my credit cards or my loan. Because I know that money, I'm allowed to have more than enough money in my account. I'm allowed to save, spend, invest, and donate however I desire. And by the way, we didn't even talk about this, but just saying this, a lot of this is oftentimes religious, y'all. What did your church, what did your synagogue, what did your religious leader teach you about money? And by the way, if you were taught that being poor is pious, you were taught wrong. There is no shame in being poor, in being in poverty. And there is no righteousness in keeping yourself poor and denying yourself the things that you want and need. When the more that you have, the more you can give to others. I feel like somebody needed to hear that today. The more you have, the more you can give. My husband and I were just talking about this. We were talking about Elon Musk, right? And people were getting really mad because they saw how much he paid in taxes and they were like, that's only so much of a percentage of what he makes, right? People say this about millionaires and billionaires a lot. Oh my gosh, they only give so much. Guys, you don't have less necessarily because they have more. That's scarcity thinking. You don't have less because somebody else has more. And when we can step out of that shameful way of thinking because the opposite of that, that's why you stay poor, is because if you get more, that means somebody else has to have less. If you believe that somebody else having more means you have less, you're not going to have more. Because if you believe it's an us versus them, you're not going to let yourself become one of them. And also, I can't give, if I give 10% of my income, if I tithe, which we do, if I tithe 10% of my income, you know what's really cool about that? Is that I can tithe 100 grand when I make $1 million, as opposed to 10 grand when I make 100K. And I don't know about y'all, but I would much rather tithe 100 grand. I would much rather be able to give more because I have more, and to believe that instead of those that have more cause others to have less. So just one last insidious shame piece that I see come through around being poor and being pious, around having more than enough means that other people have less. It's not true. And this is where intention matters, because if you are intending to do more good. If you start doing more good now with the money that you have, money is a magnifier. So if you have a lot of shame and you get a lot of money, you're going to have a lot more shame and you're going to spread a lot more shame. But if you clear that and you treat money as sacred and money as a resource and money as a tool and money as a magnifier for the goodness in your heart and all the things that you want to do with it, then when you get more, you're going to do more good. More money equals more good. So just that last thought. Thank you all for the comments as we've gone through this. I'm going to come back through in a little while after I decompress and respond to some of these, but I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate you sticking with me through this hour. If anyone has any further questions that they want addressed, let me know. And next week we will continue on. Oh, and if you're watching on the replay, #replay, so I can come like it and say hi. Okay. Yes, this is all recorded. Replay is up, will be up immediately afterwards in the group, and you will have access to it moving forward. Bye, y'all.